Good evening and welcome. I'm Nathan Anderson, and I've been in the program for the last year and a little bit, and I'll be wrapping up my master's degree in ed- educational administration with a principal emphasis before Christmas. So I'm just winding down my practicum and I'm finishing up my last class. Before I begin, I want to congratulate you on your decision and your efforts to pursue educational leadership. I will share with you a few tips and advice that I've learned along the way. First off, what was my best learning experience? From my experience, I would have to say that my experiences shadowing a principal was most beneficial. Um, in deciding who you should shadow, I would seek out recommendations from a trusted leader on who would be the quote unquote good principals to shadow. Um, I would be open to new experiences and visit schools or sites that are most unlike your practicum setting. And when you do your shadows, I would encourage you to ask or to prepare questions ahead of time to help guide your experience. In my experience, um, well, first off, I should say that I have been in a high school setting for 20, going on 21 years now. And purposely for my principal shadow, I chose to visit an elementary school and also um, a rural school, which was pre K through 12. So both of those provided me a good insight to a setting quite different from what I've been used to. So that really gave me a different insight, a different perspective, and I really value that. And actually, after these principal shadowing experiences, I will have to say that my perception has definitely shifted in what I thought was my ideal. Um, I guess what I thought was my ideal placement for a future principal type job. After these experiences, I would definitely consider an elementary setting and might even look into that a little bit more. So that was really quite earth shattering for me, I guess. I guess sometimes you just get into that tunnel vision. This is what I've been doing, this is what I will do. And for me, this shadow experience was really quite, uh, quite changing, I guess. Um, so I guess I would dare you to step outside of your comfort zone. What was the hardest part of the practicum? Well, as the question asks, except for the pandemic, so that um, oh, excuse me, I gotta try to move me. There we go. Sorry about that. I would have to say, from my personal experience, just finding the time while committed to full time teaching to fulfill the hours for the practicum was really challenging, especially during the pandemic, and also balancing your family life and whatnot outside of school proved to also be quite challenging. Um, so I would just encourage you to be very creative in seeking out opportunities. I know uh, your professor may suggest some opportunities, whether it be a webinar, online learning. Take advantage of those to accommodate your schedule. And also just seek out activities within your school that might relate to your current position. And it might be in a leadership role, but yet you're still fulfilling your own duties. Also, managing the practicum with other classes co-occurring did prove some challenges throughout this most recent semester. Uh, if I did it again, I would perhaps consider taking the last course, the 727 practicum, as a standalone. Of course, a lot of hinges on what your schedule for your courses are, but preferably, I would have very much enjoyed just having my practicum to finish up this last 7 weeks instead of having to balance another course because there's a lot to polish up your final portfolio and whatnot. So I would consider that if there's room for that in your um, schedule. Also, I would uh, advise you on being an advocate for gaining experiences. Do not assume that your cooperating principal will conveniently keep you in mind at all times while they're trying to juggle their day to day business with their own schedule. Principals are busy people, I realized. And sometimes you just have to kind of sneak your way in, gently and subtly, kind of shoulder your way in and just ask, hey, I realize you have this going on. Is this something I could join in? Or better yet, give some insight to your principal, like, hey, I realize this is going on. I would be happy to take this on. Offer suggestions to make something easier for them. Um, so don't just assume that your principal is going to take into account that you're waiting to get hours. So you really have to be mindful of that and continue to advocate on that. Just keep that in mind. Well, as you say, hindsight is always 2020. What do I wish I would have known last January? Um, well, if you're well, you've been in the education system for a while, so if you're like most educators, I'm sure you realize every year that there's always room for improvement and efficiency. Uh, just like with tracking your hours, I wish I had a more user-friendly system. I found myself just logging in a notebook for a while and then transferring over to um, my spreadsheet in Excel. Sometimes it was hard to do that translation if time went by, things like that. So if you can somehow stay on top of automatically putting it into your digital system, that would be helpful. And then adding notes as soon as possible afterwards. Of course, time is always the enemy, but figuring out how to do things more efficiently will prove advantageous. And then keep in mind, time does fly by. So a lot of encroaching deadlines and whatnot can sneak up on you. And also just be mindful of the milestones for hours so that you're on good pace to get all the hours that you need. In addition, I suggest that you spend some time seeking out a cooperating supervisor. It might not be the one who's most convenient to you. Uh, what I mean by that is, I chose to use my principal in my building that I'm working in, and he's been a great resource. I can't complain. I really respect a lot of his practices and whatnot, but also I realize he's a busy person, and I don't know if necessarily he finds as much value in mentoring an individual as I maybe would have hoped. I don't think uh, I don't think he minds doing it, but it's just sometimes I feel like it might be an added burden, which really it is. Uh, so in doing this, I found myself relying on his assistant a lot. And if I had done it differently, maybe I would have pursued using him as my um, cooperating supervisor, as the assistant principal has been much more um, forthright in just sharing advice, tips, including me, things like that. Uh, so I think just take some time thinking about who that person who could be in a mentor role, who that person is, who could be that best person. So weigh out those pros and cons of who you're thinking about. It might not be the most natural choice. Um, and also use your professor as a resource. I know Professor Deshay uh, has shared things during this practicum, which has been very helpful, whether it be pointing us in directions for some webinars to get hours, and also the triad meetings with your supervising principal. Those are very helpful. So um, do use your professor as a resource. And also the practicum handbook is a great resource guide. So do refer to that. And what do you wish you had spent more time on? During my practicum, of course, time was always an issue. Uh, you're going to realize that. So it's hard to always find room for all of that. But I wish I would have been more part of a overall larger district meetings. I did attend some administrative meetings led by the superintendent. I did find those very informative, although it was challenging with the pandemic, with distant learning, obligations with my own teaching role and whatnot to be part of those. But I did find them very beneficial. Kind of got to see a little more of the behind the scenes work that administrators do. And following a suit with that, meeting with the business manager, that was really beneficial to just wrapping your head around some of the finance questions, the complicated um, formulas, whatnot that they have to abide by. So I would encourage establishing a relationship with your business manager or accountant or whatever title your finance person has in your district. Um, Establishing consistent meetings with your supervising principal is helpful. Uh, I know I met at least weekly with my principal, but it was just sometimes it was more of a almost like a drop in or when time permitted. And I totally understand it, especially during the pandemic. Principals are strapped, but just carving out that time would be helpful. And then also pursuing more administrational experiences within the district. And what I mean by that, I prefaced it in my prior slide, but in attending some of the district level meetings, I did find myself perhaps maybe uh, realizing that some other administrators in the district are a little more keen and they really want to offer and provide mentorship and opportunities for that. And I would encourage you to reach out to those other administrators in your district. It might not be the one that you're working with, but seek advice and tips from those principals. I know there was a couple principals in two other buildings within my district who were uh, they loved playing that mentor and also giving tips and advice, and they were very open to questions that I had. So I would encourage that you just reach out to those resources that are available to you within your district. A lot of times, there's a lot of information and insight right under your nose. Lastly, I'm just going to post my name again. I'm Nathan Anderson, and I have my email address and my personal phone number listed. If you're just starting the practicum and you want to reach out to me for any kind of advice or tips, I would be happy to provide that in person in more detail. Um, so I will leave that with you, and I hope this gave you a little help as you begin your journey with the practicum. Thank you, and good luck and best wishes as you move forward. Good night.